Thank you for joining us today for a webinar presented in collaboration by the Career Development Center and Alumni Association. This is Elizabeth Mueller with UWM Alumni Relations, and in this presentation today, we'll be talking about high-impact resumes and cover letters. So on our agenda, today we'll cover the following points. Points to consider in resume formats, how to tailor your resume and cover letter to best market yourself, and FAQs and specific cover letter and resume issues. So as we get started with that agenda, I want to share two key caveats that you should keep in mind as we go through this presentation and all the following information. The first is that there's not just one right way to create your resume. In the end, your resume is your own marketing tool. You want to stay away from a few key wrongs, such as errors, inaccuracies, inconsistent formatting, but there are many ways to create a resume in the right way. Most importantly, your resume should highlight your key skills, strengths, abilities, and experiences, and should be tailored to the job that you're applying for in order to accentuate the fit between you and the job and the organization you're applying to. The second caveat is that a resume and a cover letter are just one of the tools in your tool belt. While part of your job search will certainly include writing resumes and cover letters, you want to ensure that your career search plan also involves other activities such as targeting companies of interest, doing research on your field or industry, networking with people who have jobs you're interested in or at the companies you might be interested in working for. Varying your activities in this way will make for a more comprehensive search and often a more enjoyable one. And the information that you glean from these various activities will in turn help you to create a more focused and tailored resume and cover letter for the applications that you're writing. If you have questions about creating a job search plan or are looking for additional help creating that plan, one of the other webinars found on the UWM Alumni Career Services page is a webinar on creating a job search plan, how to do so, and tips for doing that strategically. So if you have questions about that, I'd encourage you to check out that webinar as well. So with those caveats in the back of our mind, let's get started with a top 10 points to consider when creating your resume and cover letter. The first is that you want to know the purpose of the resume and cover letter that you're writing. Now, you might be writing one specific resume and cover letter for a job application to prepare to go to a career fair or for a networking event. You might be writing it as a way to do outreach to inquire about opportunities that might exist that aren't specifically posted. But the thing to keep in mind that for all of those different reasons, the underlying reason you're writing your resume is that you want it to be a story starter. You want it to start a story that the employer wants to read and wants to read enough about it that they are encouraged to want to talk to you more, whether in an informal conversation, in a formal interview, over the phone, for a phone interview or Skype interview. You want your resume to start the story in a way that the employer is encouraged to reach out to you and talk more. So to do so, you want to consider your skills and abilities, your educational and professional background, and your strengths, and consider which of these are going to be the most relevant to the employer that will be reading it or the person that will be reading this resume or cover letter, and make sure that you highlight those. The second is that you want to think about the employer's needs. To be able to tell a good story, you need to show that you're a good fit. And to show that you're a good fit, you'll need to know what they're looking for. So a big piece of this, figuring out what they're looking for, can come from, of course, the job description. So if you're applying for a posted job, doing a very thorough read of that job description and comparing it to your resume, seeing how they're overlapping, and investigating how you can better accentuate the fit between what they're looking for in terms of background, strengths, and skills, so that you can both highlight those things in your resume and cover letter and organize your resume and cover letter accordingly to have those things at the top of the page. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. If you're finding that the job description you're looking to apply for is vague, or you are writing more of a kind of outreach or solicitation resume or cover letter that's not specifically for a posted job, one tip that I'd share is that looking for similar job postings to the vague description that you have or the job that you would like can give you some of the language that you'd want to include in your resume. By just going to a great search tool like Indeed, which is just www.indeed.com, a search aggregator where you can just type in a job title. Say you're looking for marketing coordinator. You can type in marketing coordinator and you're going to get lots of jobs that match that job title. You can pick and choose ones that have a lot of great language that you can then glean to make sure that those keywords that an employer who's looking for that job title sees that you have the keywords and the skills that would fit the particular job description. You might also take some time to look at, if you're applying for a specific job at a company, check out the company's website, their social media sites like LinkedIn or Twitter, or even reach out to people who work at the organization to find out more about how you might best tailor and write your resume and cover letter. The third point is that you want to lead with your strengths. They say that employers will decide in 10 seconds if they're going to keep reading your resume. Now, that doesn't mean you only get 10 seconds for the full read, but that means you want to focus on putting the most relevant information at the top third of the page so that the reader sees right away that you're a great fit and they're encouraged to keep reading and spend some more time on your resume. We'll get more into organizational options later, but keep in mind that putting the biggest highlights, the most relevant, and the places where you're really seeing overlap between your qualifications and what they're looking for in a candidate should be at the top third of the page to grab their attention. The fourth is that you want to aim for a resume that's easy to read and understand. I always remind people that your formatting should be enough to keep someone's attention, but also should not take away from the great content that you have in your resume. So you want to make sure that you're using consistent fonts and easy to read fonts. You want to make sure that your margins, your lines, your bullet points are all in line. You don't have floating bullet points here and there that are making it hard for the employer to understand the flow of your resume. You want to focus on keeping a balance of white space and text. If you look at your resume and it's just a page of text, that will probably be unattractive for someone to try to read. So balancing the white space and the text. You want to aim for a font size that's easy to read, like 11 or 12, so that it doesn't overwhelm the reader with tiny font that they are having a difficult time reading. And you want to make sure that you're avoiding jargon or acronyms that you're unsure if the employer will know what they are. If you're staying within an industry and you know that an acronym you're using will be easily understandable by the employer, no problem, then use the acronyms. But especially if you're transitioning or looking to move into a different industry or field, be really careful not to use acronyms and jargon that an employer won't understand, because that will really lose a lot of the strength of what you're trying to say. The fifth is that you want to highlight both your directly relevant and transferable skills. If you're applying for a position within the same industry, for example, you're working in PR and you want to transition just to working in a different firm, you likely will have many of the directly relevant skills like writing for various media outlets, evaluating ad campaigns, communicating with the press, etc. But there are many job seekers who are looking to transition into a different industry, in which case highlighting your transferable skills will be key. These are the skills that you've gained in a job or industry that will have prepared you well for work in the new industry, but they're maybe not exactly directly related, but they are highly applicable. So for example, if you imagine a teacher who wants to transition into more of a sales or customer service type role, while he or she might not have direct sales customer service experience in this person's teaching experience, he or she certainly has mastered the art of communicating with diverse audiences and being able to explain ideas and disseminate knowledge to a group of people, which can be a really useful skill for someone looking into customer service or sales or advising. And so highlighting those skills that really translate will show the employer that you have the skills that they're looking for, even though they might not be in the same industry that you're coming from now. One way that can help you to highlight your relevant and your transferable skills, and which we highly advise for all resumes, is that you want to begin each phrase or bullet point with an action verb. So here you see a long list of action verbs, and if you go to the CDC Resume Writing Guide, which is on the Career Development Center website, which is listed both at the beginning and at the end of this webinar, but it's just UWM .cdc.edu. You'll find the resume writing guide with an even longer list of action verbs. So you want to begin each bullet point with an action verb in the appropriate tense, the present tense for current positions and the past simple for previous experience or previous positions. Taking a look over some of these action verbs can help you identify what some of your directly relevant skills are, but also help you brainstorm about what some of the transferable skills you might not have initially thought of might be to include in your resume and highlight as a skill that will translate well into your new industry or new field. Now let's move on to the second half of the top 10 points to consider list. Point 6 is that you should describe the most important aspects of your work with numbers, visual details, and results. You want to focus on the outcome, either quantitative or qualitative, of your work. A quantitative outcome might include revenue gained or percentage of increase, but could also include numbers of people managed, people on a team, people that have attended an event or program, or the goals that you've achieved. Qualitative results can include skill development or how you contributed to the company's mission or goals. For example, say you were working with customers or clients, and you don't have an exact quantitative number about the increase in satisfaction or the number of people that you served, but you can say that your work helped to increase overall client or customer satisfaction or helped you to gain new clients. That can be a great outcome that will show the employer that I've been able to do this in my previous position, and I'll be able to do this skill, this task or responsibility in your organization. The seventh is that you can consider including non-employment experiences if they're relevant. You're certainly not limited to only including paid work experience in your resume and cover letter. You can consider also including unpaid internships, volunteer or leadership experience, coursework, or other professional development opportunities that you've completed. The important part is not so much if you were paid or not. It's more important to consider if these skills and the skills you developed in doing these skills will be relevant to the employer who will be reading the resume, and if they'll be relevant to the job or position you're applying to or reaching out to inquire about. The eighth is that you want to be consistent and concise, again highlighting the importance of clear and easy formatting so that your formatting doesn't distract the reader from the content that you've written. Huge long paragraphs, full sentences and things like this. Well, full sentences in your cover letter are certainly fine, but in your resume you want to avoid using personal pronouns. You want to keep things short, quick, and easy to read. The ninth is that you want to be honest and error-free. Of course, this can seem pretty straightforward. Of course, you want to have 0 errors in your resume, but again, this can be something that can be difficult for you to see once you've looked at your resume again and again and again. I really suggest that you take some time to have someone else look at your resume. Even if it's not someone who's a specific career advisor or trained in career counseling or advising, even just having a friend, a family member look over your resume, that can really help to catch errors that maybe you just didn't see because you've looked at your resume so many times. Or even if you've described something that to you makes complete sense, when someone else reads it, they can say, you know, that doesn't make that much sense to me. So having someone that you trust take a read over your resume. On our Alumni Career Services page, we do have UWM and community resources that have a list of places and resources where if you're looking for someone to read over your resume, you might check out those resources and find someone to read your resume that way. The last of the top 10 points to consider is that you want to consider the best format for your purposes. Each person's search is a little bit different. So depending on your individual search, a different resume format might be the most appropriate and most successful for you. So that transitions us very well into taking a look at the various options you have for your resume format. Today we'll go over 3 different resume formats: reverse chronological resumes, functional resumes, and hybrid resumes. So I'll begin with the one that you're most likely familiar with, reverse chronological resumes. We'll look at an example of each resume after we go over the main points and organizational style of each. So in reverse chronological resumes, you'll describe your experience in reverse chronological order, meaning starting with your most present experience and going further back in the past as you go down the page. These resumes can be good for people who have very consistent work histories and work in more traditional fields, but they can be less ideal for a person who has gaps in their work history or maybe who's looking to change careers or change fields. So let's take a look at an example of a reverse chronological resume. So you can see here in Monica's resume that she describes her past work experience in reverse chronological order, starting with the most present, the job she has from January 2008 until now, and then going further back into the past and further back into the past. She does a great job of leading with her strengths, and particularly those that match the employer's need. As you read her objective, you can see that she's put some thought into what are some of the things that the employer is looking for in terms of goal assessment, effective web design strategies, and again, she highlights those in the top third of her page to grab the attention of the employer so they're encouraged to keep reading the rest of her resume. She does another great thing at the bottom here by highlighting both her directly relevant and transferable skills in a separate computer skills section at the bottom of her resume, which certainly will highlight some of the skills that the employer either detailed in the job description or that she knows from doing research on the field the employer will expect or look for in a resume. And the last idea that we have up in the right-hand corner is that you can consider using the same header format for your resume, your cover letter, and your reference page in order to create a professional and consistent brand for your application materials. This way, as an employer either prints out or opens up on a computer your multiple documents, they look consistent and professional as they look at all of them, which can really help, again, to make them easy to read and easy to understand. Now let's take a look at functional resumes. So a functional resume describes your experience categories separate from your work history. In a functional resume, you'll list your work history or partial work or experience history at the bottom of your resume. And at the top of your resume, you'll pull out categories to highlight these skills that match the employer's needs. It'll make a bit more sense when we look at an example in just a minute here. But these types of resumes can be great for career changers because they allow you to really focus more on your transferable skills and the skills that will be relevant to the employer rather than maybe the places that you've worked. It can be difficult because it does decontextualize your experience from the place that you've done these jobs. And so while it can be a great pro that it takes your experience away from the place that you've done the experience if you're looking to change fields or change industries, we want to be careful to make sure that you're having another person look at it to make sure it makes sense and that it's not deconceptualizing your experience so much that the employer will not really understand the skills and the experiences that you're bringing to the table. So let's take a look at an example of a functional resume. So here in Journey's resume, you can see that she pulls out different experience categories and describes her experience in these separate category sections. Now, in taking a look at her objective and comparing that to her her categories here, you can tell that she's really strategically picked the experience categories that she would highlight in her resume based on the type of job she's applying for. So here you can see she's looking for a multimedia education curriculum design assistant, and so she pulls out the categories of multimedia experience, which certainly will speak to the job she's applying to, materials and program development experience, and then teaching and coaching related experience. She still starts each bullet point with an action verb in the appropriate tense with worked, performed, developed, adapted, tutored, for example, but keeps the experience categories grouped but separate from the place that she's done this work. Then at the end, at the bottom of the page, you can see she's listed her partial experience history at the end with the job title, when she did that job, and where that job was. Now, if you take a closer look to try to understand why Journey may have chosen to use a format like this, is that her current job, her job titles are counselor, coach, tutor, and the places that she has done those are more in kind of counseling type centers, whereas the new job that she's looking at focuses less on counseling and more on multimedia design. It still has that education element, which she has some experience in from her counseling, but you can see that she really wanted to highlight the fact that she has great not only experience in education, but also that multimedia experience, whereas if she went with a reverse chronological resume, the employer might be focusing more on the fact that she has a background as a counselor and maybe not so much as focusing on that she's got all this great multimedia experience. Two other quick things to note about Journey's resume is that in her objective, she does a great job of balancing her ask with her offer. So she's defining her goals while also briefly describing the skills and experiences that she can contribute to the role and organization. So her ask is that she's seeking this multimedia education curriculum design assistant position, but she's also highlighting the skills and the background that she has to offer that will make her a good fit for this position. And I can imagine, although I don't have it right in front of me, that she chose these 5 bullet points based on what was described in the job description, the research that she'd done, and really picked out the things that she thought would be the most relevant to the reader, to the hiring manager. The last thing about Journey's resume that I'll just point out is that you can see Journey here is maybe looking to move between two places, or is living in one place but searching in another. And so if you are in the middle of moving or thinking of moving to a new place and want to show your flexibility in location, this can be a great way to highlight two physical addresses to show that you are flexible in where you're living, or that you have plans to move to maybe the place that you're applying for positions. Last, let's talk about the hybrid or chrono-functional resumes, which really are kind of a mix between the reverse chronological and functional resume. They bring both of those two formats together. By combining both of the formats, in that they include categories, but they still keep your experiences connected to your work context or the place that you did that work. So in this format, you organize and group your experiences into sections that are focused on a particular skill or experience. This provides you the freedom to highlight your strengths early in your resume, even if those jobs or those experiences might be more in the past than, for example, your current position or your most recent position. Again, they can be great for career changers because they allow you to highlight your experiences in a different way, but we want to be careful to make sure that they're easy to understand, because if we're not being careful, they can be a bit chronologically confusing. And so again, let's take a look at an example and it will become more clear, I think. So here you can see in Tracy's example, in Tracy's sample resume, that she has chosen section headers that provide interest and allow her as an applicant to bring her experiences that are more relevant to the employer closer to the top of the page. And so she breaks out her experiences into two bigger sections: counseling experience and related diversity experience. Now, this allows her to pull experiences further in the past to the top of her resume. Her experiences within each section will stay in reverse chronological order. So you can see within counseling experience, she has her experience from 2007 to 2011, and then below that from 2006 to 2007. But because she starts a different section here, she's able to put her current position lower on the page in her resume. Now, again, if we put our thinking caps on and think about why Tracy may have done this, as you can see from the summary that she lists at the top, it becomes clear that she's probably applying for a type of counseling position, since she's highlighting that in her summary. And while her current job certainly has great transferable skills like providing support and assisting with homework and lesson plans and things like that, her current position probably doesn't speak as strongly to the position she's looking to get as her more in the past positions as being a counselor or a counselor practicum student. So by pulling out these different sections, she's able to move this counseling experience to the top of the page without breaking the rule of reverse chronological order because of the two different sections. And then she's also able to use these great big bold section headers that call out to the employer that she's got the experience that they're looking for. And that's what this little box on the right explains, that using category titles can create interest and frame your experience in a way that will be interesting to the employer. So you might consider substituting more generic work experience or employment history for something more specific to describe your experience, and again, to grab the attention of the employer without even maybe having to read all of the little details within that section, but they're going to know by seeing that section, counseling experience, that you do in fact have counseling experience. Now that we've covered the different formats to consider using when creating your resume, let's talk about strategies to further tailor your resume for a specific job or company. The first point is that you should do so. It's important to do research and know the norms of your target field. This will give you great insight about things like the type of resume format that will be most acceptable for your field, the style that will be most attractive, and the length of the resume that you should use. For example, if you're applying to a marketing firm or a graphic design firm, your resume will look quite different from someone who's applying to a job at an accounting firm, for example. Your marketing resume might be a lot more detailed, colorful for things like that, while, it's more typical for an accounting resume to follow a much more structured resume format. So doing the research on your field, knowing the best format, and knowing what will be most attractive to the reader will help you make a much better resume. You can include a leadership or a brand statement. This goes back to thinking about your objective as a place to balance your ask with your offer. It gives you a chance to highlight your skills in the top third of your page, as well as create attention and show that you're a really great candidate for the position, again, encouraging the employer to continue reading. You want to start with the job description of the job that you want, or jobs like it, like we talked about before, using Indeed or another search engine to find similar jobs, and use the keywords derived from that job description. It's common for larger organizations, especially to use a computer program that helps them to look through resumes for keywords. And so making sure that you have keywords from the job description in your resume will be very important if the employer is using one of those computer search and screens. But even if the employer is actually physically reading your resume to make the decisions about who they'll bring in for an interview, they'll be looking for those keywords. And so you don't want to be so blatant as to copy and paste huge sections of the job description into your resume, but you want to make sure that you're sprinkling your resume with the keywords that the employer is looking for, derived from the job description, taken from the language that they use on their website, etc. You want to think about the most important strengths you bring to the position and use the top of the first page to your best advantage. And if you are making a two-page resume, again, considering your format and making sure that a two-page resume is appropriate for your industry, if you're using a two-page resume, making sure that something that's on the second page, buried on the second page, isn't maybe one of the things that would be most grabbing the attention of the employer, because they might not get there and then it will just be buried and they'll never know. You always want to think about formatting your resume for the reader. So if you're thinking, what format should I use? Should I include this experience, this job experience, this internship, this volunteer experience? Ask yourself, would they understand, and why would they care? If you think about the job description, about the research that you've done on the position and the organization, and put yourself in the shoes of the reader when you're asking those questions about, should I include this or should I not, you'll have a much easier time answering that question and knowing what to include on your resume if you think, okay, well, what would be more attractive to this employer? Experience A or experience B? Well, if it's experience B, well, now you have your answer, and maybe looking back at the formats that I described earlier to think about how to best structure your resume to highlight those experiences. Just like your resume, you want to tailor your cover letter to the job or industry that you're applying to or company that you're applying to. So let's take a look at how to do that, and then we'll look at an example of a cover letter. So in your cover letter, it's very important to address your cover letter to a particular person anytime that you can. This can sometimes take some additional research, because if you're finding a job posting on a company's website, they might not have a contact person listed or a hiring manager's name listed. So I'd encourage you to do some additional outreach and investigation before you send in your cover letter and resume to inquire about who you should address your cover letter to. This can do two things. It helps you to get your name and show your excitement and your assertiveness and your ambition for this position before you even turn in your resume. So if you are able to call even a general HR number, if they do have a phone number listed, if they've got an email address listed, reaching out to express your excitement about this position, your anticipation in sending in your application, but your desire to address your cover letter to the reader, to the hiring manager who will be reading the resumes and cover letters, it will give you one extra touch point with that organization, which will differentiate you from everyone else who doesn't make that phone call or doesn't send that email. The second piece is that then as you send in your application will stand out from the stack of the rest of the resumes or cover letters because it will show that you've done that additional outreach and research to find out who to address your cover letter to. And you never know, you might have had a great phone conversation or a great email exchange with the person who will be reading your resume, and now you've been able to address your resume and cover letter to that specific person. So again, it'll jog their mind as they're reading your resume that, you're a stellar applicant who went above and beyond to make your application really great, which shows that you probably would be a great employee as well. So it can really give you an advantage over other applicants. Similarly to your resume and your cover letter, you want to lead with your strengths. You want to organize your cover letter so that the order of ideas is predictable and easy to understand. And we'll look at that when we get into the example. You should focus on your experiences, accomplishments, and not as opportunities. In your resume and in your cover letter, you want to communicate that you're an active and assertive individual, an employee, team member, manager. And so while our tendency might be to say something passive like my responsibilities included ABC, or I had the opportunity to plan such and such event, I want to really encourage you to stay in more of an active voice. Pull out those passive clauses and just start straight with your action verb to be able to talk about the tasks that you have done as accomplishments and not as responsibilities or opportunities. So, for example, if you were about to write, I had the opportunity to plan XYZ event, instead you can just say you planned XYZ event, you managed the invitations and registration process, you organized the logistics and speakers, and you gained 20 new clients for the organization, for example. Starting with those action verbs really helps to show that not only is this work that you've done, but that you've taken initiative, that you're assertive, and that you would be a great employee for the newer organization. In your cover letter, just like your resume, you want to provide results and draw out on examples that were listed in your resume. So oftentimes we'll get questions, so if I have it on my resume, should it also be in my cover letter, or is that off limit? Should they be two different things? You certainly most often will have overlap between the things you've talked about in your resume and your cover letter. You just want to ensure that you're not just simply repeating the same things, that if you've listed a job and a bullet point on your resume, but you want to talk about it in your cover letter, that you're explaining it in more detail and you're showing really how it's relevant to the position that you're applying to, or how that experience provided you and gave you and helped you to develop the skills that are needed in the new position that you're applying to. You want to include research that speaks to why you want to work at that particular organization. This can take a little bit of time to do that research, but putting that time and energy into writing a researched and targeted cover letter is going to be better if even if it means you're writing 5 cover letters for applications rather than applying to 20 applications. Those 5 strategic, well-written, researched, and tailored cover letters will get you a lot further than 20 kind of blanket cover letters that are all saying the same thing. Doing that research and speaking to the organization will grab their attention. It will definitely help you demonstrate your fit for the organization and your ability to really bring something to the organization. So now let's take a look at an example. So in this example, you can see that John has done a good job addressing his letter to a particular person. He uses a formal letter format by using a colon after the dear Mr. or Ms. You can see that he has about 3 to 5 paragraphs and no longer than 1 page. Each paragraph should have a theme or a focus, just like if you were writing a paper or an article. Each paragraph would have a topic sentence and then speak more about that theme or example or topic before moving on to a next paragraph. And on the right side, we've got some ideas about what to include in each of the sections or paragraphs. So your introduction should include why you're writing. Oftentimes this can be to apply for an advertised position, but in our CDC writing guide, you'll be able to see that there are some samples that explain how to write more of an outreach cover letter that investigates, a need that you might be able to fill at the organization or inquires about opportunities that might exist and having a conversation about those, not necessarily a posted position. And it also should include why you're interested in the position or the organization. This is where your research can come in to talk about, what attracted you to the organization, maybe what the mission, what the goals, what the organization is doing in the community, or what the organization, how the organization helps its employees develop and things like that. So a little bit of research on their website will help you to determine what makes you interested in the organization. Again, you also could check out their social media sites. You might look at LinkedIn to see what other UWM alumni work there and reach out to them about their experience working in the organization. These could all be things that you mentioned in your introductory paragraph to grab the attention of the employer. In your main body paragraphs, which might be, 1 to 3 paragraphs, 3 if they're going to be short paragraphs, because again, you don't want it to be longer than a page, you're going to include qualifications or accomplishments that are pertinent to the position or to the organization's needs. And you want to draw out on concrete examples of how your skills or experiences make you a good fit for the organization, and really explain what you can do for the organization. Explain to them what you bring to the table that you think really differentiates you and makes you a better candidate than anyone else applying. And the last, in the closing, you just want to have a quick closing that gives a statement of appreciation. And if you'd like to include a date that you'd follow up with additional information, you certainly can. I always put that part as optional, because if you would like to leave it more open, just, thank you for your consideration and time. And even if you do plan to follow up, that could be something you included in this last paragraph, or that you just did on your own without writing about it in your cover letter. To conclude today, let's go over a quick couple FAQs that some we've talked about a little bit, but some might be new. So the first being, do I have to include everything in my resume or cover letter? Certainly you don't. Remember that your resume is your own marketing tool and is a story starter. The goal is to tell the employer or the person reading your resume enough information to grab their attention and want to talk to you more. So certainly it would be very difficult, up to impossible, to get all of your experiences, all of your skills and strengths onto your resume. So focus on which are the ones that will be most relevant to that employer. Make sure those are there to start your story so that you can get to the next phase of telling them more about your story in a conversation or in an interview. The second FAQ is, how should I address gaps in my work history? You might consider using one of the alternative formats, such as the functional or hybrid resume, because these resumes really put emphasis on your skills rather than the timeline of your work history. And so while a reverse chronological resume might be great for some folks, functional or hybrid resume that focuses on your skills and on your accomplishments could be a much better fit for you, especially with a gap in a work history or as a career changer. Third, how to format online resumes. Two things about this. As you're doing applications and uploading resumes to an application site, or if you're attaching them to an email to send to a hiring manager, I want to highlight the importance of, whenever possible, converting your Word document, your work document, Works document, whatever word processing software that you're using, converting those documents to a PDF before you would upload them or send them. Now, every once in a while, an application website will only let you upload a Word document or a certain type of formatted document, and so, of course, in that instance, you have to. But in all cases where you can choose the type of document to either send in an email or upload to an application site, it's so important. You have spent so much time making your resume beautiful in line, no floating bullet points, everything that should be bold is bolded, everything that's italic should be italics. If you send your resume or upload your resume in a Word document, you run the risk of the person opening that resume and it being a total mess and completely different from the way that you were seeing it. You know, if they're opening it through a different software program, if they use a different type of computer than you do or operating system, your resume might look different. And when they look at it, they will assume that this is the way that you sent it. And so, you know, if it's impossible or difficult to read, they might stop reading it. So saving as a PDF can be a way to really ensure that no matter how the person opens it, your resume and your cover letter will keep the consistent, easy to read, beautiful formatting that you've taken the time to do, and they'll open it and they'll look just the same as you did. The second is that a colleague recently recommended to me a website that I thought was fun that pulls information from your LinkedIn profile and turns it into a visual resume, complete with colorful charts and timelines, and it can be a fun way to maybe share your information in a different way. Again, we always want to think about what's the most appropriate way to share your information. So this might not be necessarily for someone who's looking to turn in a resume to a very traditional field or traditional organization or type of job. This might not be the best, but check out the website. It's Visualize Me, VIZUALIZE.me. It's a free resource and can be fun to check out. And again, it just pulls from your LinkedIn profile and it gives you links to copy and paste and share your resume in a different way if that would be an appropriate format for you to share your resume. The fourth is, do I include my references on my resume? No, your references should be in a separate document outside your resume. You might be sending, a couple documents. You might be sending your resume, your cover letter, and your references, but they should all be in 3 separate documents, not copy and pasted into the email, not included in your resume. But like I said before, you might consider using the same header on your resume, your cover letter, and your references page, just so it opens up nicely and looks like a nice professional brand across the board. And the last question, the last FAQ is, how can I write a general resume? And this is really kind of a trick question that hopefully in going through this webinar you feel sure about, that it's very difficult and you should really try to stay away from writing a general resume. While you don't need to reinvent the wheel every time you write your resume, you certainly can use parts from other versions of your resume, or I often encourage people to start what I call like a resume bank, where you keep all of your information from all of your previous jobs, all of your previous internships, coursework, volunteer. It might be, even a 5, 6, 7-page document that's just got everything in it with all of your bullet points and the time and everything. But then you can keep that as your bank and use that to copy and paste the sections or the bullet points that will be relevant to the employer. So again, you're not recreating the wheel, recreating or coming up from scratch every time, but you can have this bank to pull from so that you're really, being strategic about your time, but also tailoring your resume and your cover letter to the specific job that you're applying to and company that you're applying to. And last, I'll leave you with a few additional resources. I've mentioned a few times the Career Development Center webpage, as well as the Career Development Center resource resume guide and reference guide. Another place that can be great to look is our UWM Alumni Association webpage if you're looking for upcoming events to attend, such as networking events or other ways to get in touch with alumni. That can be great. It also is where our Alumni Career Services page is listed that has additional webinars, UWM and community resources for your job search support needs, in addition to information about programming, events, career fairs, etc. And last, I have a resource that has a lot of great resume and CV resources for job seekers, which is quintessentialcareers.com. They've got a lot of great different things, and it's easily searchable for more samples and other tips for writing your resume, CVs, and cover letters. So I want to thank you so much for your attention today. Hope that as you're leaving this webinar, you've got some great tips to get started or improve on your resumes and cover letters, and hope to see you at an upcoming UWM alumni event soon. Thanks so much.